Recording now. And I'd like to just gather us in and say a few words of welcome. Is it possible to put away the screen share just for a moment so we can just look at each other? Thank you. That's great. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. It's the it's the noon hour for us here on the East Coast, and very glad to have this group of learners together. We will begin with a bracha as we do each week, an opportunity to just pause here and take a deep breath, to be grateful for this opportunity to learn together, to look once again at an ancient beloved text and see what it has to say to us. So join me in a bracha, please. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Amen. As I shared with the Adat Shalom community, we have a most wonderful guest with us today, and I will introduce Rabbi Laura Duhan Kaplan in just a moment. I'd like to just share a quick vignette about this remarkable part of the Torah. You may remember 10 years ago here on the East Coast, on the weekend of Parashat Balak, we had a massive, massive storm which knocked out the whole city, and for I think more than a week, we were without electricity. It happened that that weekend, my immediate family and my parents were gathered at a hotel to celebrate my parents' 50th wedding anniversary. We were in a very, very fancy posh spot that my parents had organized for us. And we brought up the story of Balak and the talking donkey, and one of our kids sort of rolled his eyes. He was the youngest at the time, still is the youngest, young boy, and he said, "Oh, don't be ridiculous. There's no such thing as a talking donkey." But lo and behold, the theme at the hotel for that weekend was Shrek. So as soon as we emerged from our little Friday night gathering, there indeed was the talking donkey walking around the lobby of the hotel. So it made for a relationship to this parsha that I never will forget, because the child who thought he knew suddenly was speechless, and gave us an opportunity to talk about the magic and beauty of fairy tales, even the ones that are baked into our sacred texts. It is a total delight and really an honor to welcome Rabbi Laura Duhan Kaplan, who is currently on the faculty of the Vancouver School of Theology, has also been a pulpit rabbi and a professor of philosophy, and I believe also women's studies, Rabbi Laura, if I'm saying that correct, at UNC here on the East Coast in North Carolina. But I have to add that when people have said to me over the years, "Wow, tell me about your training in rabbinical school," I would always want to mention my classes with Rabbi Laura, which were inspiring, energizing, eye-opening, and just wonderful for me as a student myself. So I'm especially grateful for her presence with us today. She is a master teacher on many topics. I have more to say about that perhaps another time, but is coming to us today to share some of her expertise on the appearance and roles of animals in the Torah, and of course, especially the donkey, who plays such a prominent role in this parasha. And I believe she'll be speaking a little bit today from some of the research she did for her book, which is available, I think, probably through many outlets, but Amazon for sure. So thank you, Rabbi Laura, and welcome to the Vancouver School of Theology students that are with us. And with that, I turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Rachel. I think I might be a little bit out of focus.
Yeah, just a little.
So we're going to fix that. Oh,
Yeah,
that's much
better,
better.
better. Thank you.
As I said earlier, as we were logging in, we're all still learning how to use our fancy room. Thank you so much, Rachel. Do you go in your shul by Rachel, Rabbi Hirsch?
Rachel is fine for this gathering.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Rachel, for that beautiful introduction. And I know that everyone at Adat Shalom already knows what an extraordinary rabbi you are and how many different levels of knowledge and being and awareness you bring to your work. So I appreciate you, and I have no doubt that everyone present appreciates you. We're here at the Vancouver School of Theology, joining you from our course on eco-theology in Judaism. And we have 5 of us on campus in this room and 5 of us on Zoom logging in by distance. So we're very excited that technology allows us to connect. And I also feel connected by your opening story, Rachel, because I was actually in Maryland during that storm at the Pearlstone Retreat Center, right, where the electricity went out, and we spent a week literally melting down in the heat. And just kudos to the retreat center staff who did everything they could to keep everyone calm and learning together at this retreat. So thank you all very much. I'm going to ask Janice to share the screen, and then I will talk a little bit about the content. Great. So Rachel very generously invited me to share some of the ideas in my book, Mouth of the Donkey, Reimagining Biblical Animals, that came out just about a year ago, almost, but not quite, in time for Parashat Balak. And this year it is in time for Parashat Balak. And of course, the book is named after the talking donkey. The basic premise of the book, which is a short and readable book, is that the writers whose spiritual perception and voices speak to us through the text, they wrote their writings, the Tanakh, in a specific place. Their stories are grounded in a specific environment, and they know a great deal about the life of the animals that they write about. And they assume that we, the audience, do as well. But sometimes we don't, and we have to recover that knowledge. And in the book, I do a little bit of recovering the knowledge and reimagining the stories, perhaps a little bit more as the authors understood them. Although I certainly go beyond that into some other understanding. The book also suggests that reading the stories with animal characters carefully helps us also see more clearly the Tanakh's themes of ecology, sustainability, interdependence, animal intelligence, the web of creation. This is just, looking at the animal stories is just one of many different tools for exploring that part of the Tanakh. And in the book, I use and I also explain many different methods of Torah interpretation. So the book is also an introduction to how to read the Tanakh creatively. Oh, Janice, next slide, please. Thanks. I just want to point out this extraordinary photo of a donkey that has been working in Colombia to carry books around to children. You can find the story on the BBC website. I use many methods of Torah interpretation, and this is just a preview of what I'll be talking about for the next 30 minutes or so. I look at the Parashat, the plain meaning of the text, and we'll understand just a little bit about the personality of the very reliable donkey who behaves perhaps in a surprising, perhaps in an unsurprising way in the story. We'll look through the technique of drash, which I am defining today as looking at the way an idea or a motif or a character is presented in different stories across different texts in the Tanakh. And when we see a consistent presentation, then we can see some of the core values and teachings that are expressed throughout the Tanakh. And we'll see in a few moments that there is a very consistent presentation of donkeys across the text. And it gives us the opportunity to ask, so what's special about the donkey in Parashat Balak? I'll also look a little bit using the technique of remez, which is defined in this 13th century scheme of Torah interpretation, the Peshat, Drash, Remez, Sod, or Pardes method. The Remez is defined in the system as looking for the allegorical or metaphorical meaning of the teaching. And I'll suggest that learning to follow the wisdom of the donkey also means developing our own spiritual perception and finding an inner guide. And then, of course, there is Sod, the mystical or Kabbalistic or Hasidic teaching that comes out of the text. And in this case, I suggest that hidden in the donkey stories is a particular kind of spiritual meditation that we can adapt and use. Metaphorically speaking, we do not have to literally go out and recruit a donkey, a physical donkey, to be a partner. So let me talk a little bit about the donkeys in the Tanakh. Next slide, please. Many of us will already be familiar with the story of Bilam's donkey. For some of us, this may be new. For others, this may be a familiar and favorite story. But it unfolds like this. The Israelites are wandering somewhat intentionally through the wilderness of the Sinai Peninsula, which, by the way, I have just learned that ecological studies have come out, and the Sinai Peninsula back in 1200 BCE was actually a savanna, a fertile grassland dotted with small trees and a reasonable amount of water. So you got to picture that and not a barren desert. The Israelites are living a semi-nomadic life in this area, and they've been spending a lot of time in military training, and they have developed a strong and large army, and the local nations are becoming afraid of them. So King Balak of Moab hires the seer Bilam to curse the Israelites, so that the Israelites will lose their military strength. And Bilam, who understands himself as a servant of Yud-Heh Vav-Heh, the one true God, Bilam communicates with God through dreams. And when Bilam receives the invitation to this job, he has confusing dreams. He doesn't know what to do. One night he dreams that God doesn't want him to go. Another night he dreams that God does want him to go. He cannot figure out if God wants him to accept the job or not? Finally, Balak's messengers persuade him, and Balaam saddles up his donkey and gets ready to go. And now we're going to pause in that story, and I'm going to talk a little bit about donkeys in the Tanakh in general. Because if you understand the logic of those stories, you see much more clearly what might be going on in Parashat Balak. Next slide, please. In the Torah, donkeys are highly respected working animals. The laws and traditions of Shabbat require that donkeys are entitled to 1 day off per week. A small donkey cannot be forced, should not be forced, to keep up with an ox. If you've got one donkey and one ox, you cannot yoke them to the same plow. And if you see a donkey fallen under its load, you must help it to stand up, even if the donkey's owner is your arch enemy. This is not an economic rule about protect someone else's investment. This is a rule where you directly reach out and help the donkey itself. And in fact, Midrash later develops this theme and says, maybe when you reach out to the donkey of your arch enemy will see that you are actually a good person because you have compassion for the donkey, and perhaps you will start to heal your relationship. It's a good idea. Why do donkeys have this pride of place in the Torah? And why do so many characters ride them? Because donkeys are reliable and perceptive and decisive and helpful. I'll just give two little anecdotes. One comes from a newspaper article from the early 1920s in the USA about the role of donkeys in helping miners. And the journalist says, one of the great things about donkeys is, donkeys and mules they're talking about, once they learn the job, they do it right. Even if they have an inexperienced driver, they don't follow the driver, they do what they're supposed to do, and they help train the driver. And the other one is that sometimes a donkey or a mule will be a better judge of the safety of a situation. And so if you tell your donkey to go in a direction and it says no, respect its wisdom. That's from an article about donkeys and mules working in the mining industry. The other one is a friend of mine who lives in a rural area. She was badly injured, had difficulty using her arms. She adopted a companion animal donkey to help her with things, but the donkey was so committed to helping her that when she did her rehab exercises that involved reaching down into a barrel and picking up items over and over again, the donkey kept interfering, right, and saying with body language, here, let me help you, and tried to do her rehab exercises for her. So we see that donkeys are emotional and physical support animals now, and that's what they turn out to be in the Tanakh as well. Next slide, please. When we are, see, Shrek is in this slideshow as well. When we look at the stories about donkeys in the Tanakh, we see that they are a great example of what the biblical scholar Robert Alter means by a biblical type scene. It's a kind of standard scene. There's sort of a standard script across stories for how this scene unfolds. We're familiar with them, for example, in movies. right? The hero escapes in a car chase. In romantic comedies, the would-be lovers miscue all the time. Villains make ridiculous, improbable, long final confessions while they're standing over someone with a gun, thus giving them, 15 minutes to escape and fight back. The scenes do not actually make sense in reality, these particular scenes, but they are a scene that we expect to see in a movie. And when we see the scene, we have a sense of what plot point is coming. So we're feeling and thinking along with the characters. We kind of get a sense of what we're supposed to feel. But when there's a variation, there's a delightful surprise. And in the Tanakh, Robert Alter says some of the typical type scenes are future lovers meet at a well, divine messengers show up to predict a pregnancy, a dying hero instructs their heirs. You are probably familiar with some of these scenes. But one of the ones that Alter does not notice, because he is not an animal lover, or perhaps was not raised to be an animal lover by my mother, he doesn't notice the donkey type scene. Next slide, please. And by the way, we'll get to some text, but I'm setting the stage to see the text. In the biblical type scene, a distressed character who is unsure about what to do or say saddles up their donkey and rides. And when they arrive at their destination, they know what to do and they know what to say. Or at least in one of these cases, they think they know what to do and they think they know what to say. Avraham is really kind of a variation on the type scene, but we may or may not get to that. But here's the type scene. Avraham, for example, when God tells him, go and offer your beloved son to me as a burnt offering, and I'll show you the place where it's going to happen. Abraham probably is not sure what he ought to do, and he certainly does not know where he is going. But what does he do? He saddles up his donkey and he rides, and on the third day, he comes to the place. And in the place, he finds out that actually he's not supposed to offer his son. In a less known story, perhaps because it's not in the Torah itself, but it appears in Joshua and also, I believe, in Judges, the biblical character Caleb ben Yefuneh, who is a close friend and, in fact, a leadership successor to Yehoshua, to Joshua. He has a daughter whose name is Aksa. Aksa gets married, and young Aksa and her husband want to have a piece of land that they can start to work when they begin their marriage. And Aksa tells her husband, my dad has some land. Why don't you go and ask if he will give us this land as, part of launching us into our new married life? I'm expanding a little bit what they say, the story is very terse, but that's what it is. Aksa asks her husband to please ask her dad for the land. And her husband says, no, you ask him. Right? Aksa is thinking, man to man, the new son-in-law has a better chance. Aksa's husband is thinking, no, you're his daughter, he's crazy about you, you ask. So Aksa saddles up her donkey, she rides, she gets off, and she knows just the right words to say to her father, and he gifts them with the land. Another story. I don't want to go on too long about these stories, but they follow the same pattern. Abigail, whose husband Naval, aptly named the fool, whose husband Naval crosses the outlaw David before he becomes king, and David and his men are headed over to Abigail and Nabal's land to kill Nabal. So what does Abigail do? She saddles up her donkey, she rides out to greet David and his band, she gets off, and when she gets off, she knows exactly the words to say that make David back off. And not only that, he seems to fall in love with her because of her way of speaking. Conveniently, Nabal dies of a heart attack a few days later, and Abigail becomes one of David's wives. Last one, the Shunammite woman in the book of Kings. She's a disciple of the prophet Elisha. Elisha, it seems, has helped her retain her hope that she's going to have a child. And one day when the child is a teenager, he suddenly falls ill and she thinks he's dying. And she doesn't know where Elisha is, since he's a wandering prophet. But she saddles up her donkey and she rides and she finds him. And when she gets off, she grabs his legs and doesn't let him go until he comes with her to heal her son. And the Bilam story appears in this context as another variation on the scene. We've got someone who's supposed to be a great seer, but he's getting unclear messages in his dream visions. So what does he do? He saddles up his donkey and he rides. Next slide, please. Oh, just in case you don't believe me about the type scenes, look at these phenomenal exceptions that prove the rule. King Shaul, King Saul, the failed king, when we meet him, he's looking for his father's donkeys. Does he ever find them? No, he does not. They return home without his help. If the donkey is that inner guide that helps you know where you're going and what you want to say, King Saul doesn't ever find his inner guide. Same thing with the prophet Shimshon, Samson. After a fit of destructive anger, the only thing that he has left to fight against his enemies, which by the way are his in-laws and their friends, the only thing he has left to fight is the jawbone of a dead donkey. He's got the last vestige of any bit of wisdom in him as he falls apart. And just to comment on this photo, which is a sculpture of Samson and the lion, I've also seen it on the internet with the caption, Hercules attempting to give his cat a pill. Next slide, please. It's no wonder if the donkey is the inner wisdom guide that the prophet Zechariah says that when the Mashiach, the Messiah, the anointed king who will bring the Israelites together under a banner of justice and equity, when this king comes, he's going to enter Jerusalem riding on a donkey. Not just because a donkey is the ride of choice for the ordinary working person, but also because the donkey is the inner wise guy, and this person will have that guy, according to Zechariah. Next slide, please. On to Bilam and his donkey. Can you click the link, Janice, and see if it shows?
No.
It doesn't show. Okay. In that case, I will navigate to it and then share my screen. Oh, I think I know how to activate it on my screen. Let me just check before I share my screen. Back to the meeting. Back to my slides. Sorry for the usual technical moments on Zoom.
No problem. We're all enjoying watching the donkeys, the images go through our imagination
Thanks.
as we absorb all of this.
Okay, let me navigate to the meeting, and I think I know how to do it. I'll pick me, share the screen. Go to full screen, and then just narrowing it out in case they're also trying to do this as it actually works. And now the link should work. Can you see that? By your end? No?
No, we don't see it.
Well, how about if you don't worry about it, and I'll read and translate. I'll just tell you where I am in case you want to read along in your book or on your device.
Okay. If you, Laura, if you would just unshare, then we could see more of you at least that way.
Oh, yes, thank you.
There, thank you.
Okay, great. I am in Bamidbar, Numbers, chapter 22, and I am in verse 21. And I'll just read the Hebrew and translate. And like, we have so many translations that call the donkey an ass, and we have so many translations that call her a she-ass. I felt that those not only seem ludicrous in contemporary English, but also, given that we sometimes use ass as an insult, this is very disrespectful to the donkey. So that's why I'm going to read and translate, so that donkey is donkey. And by the way, the image of donkeys is absolutely consistent across Tanakh, whether it's an aton, a jenny or a female donkey, or whether it's a hamor, a jack or a male donkey. They behave the same way in the stories. Here we go. ויקום בלעם בבוקר, ויחבוש את אתונו, וילך עם שרי מואב. Balaam got up in the morning. He saddled his donkey. He went with the dignitaries of Moab in order to undertake the errand as per his second somewhat confusing dream. And then, oh no, Vayichar af Elohim ki holechu, vayityasev malach Adonai baderech, v'satan lo, v'hu rochev al atono u'shnei ne'arav imo. God was angry, or got angry, because Balaam was going. So a messenger of God, we often translate it angel, messenger of God, stood along the way in order to oppose him. Meanwhile, he's riding along on his donkey, and his two young servants are with him. Just want to point out a little resonance here, side digression, a little resonance here with the story of Abraham, who is riding along on his donkey, and he has his two young servants with him. One could make a midrash to read this bit of the Balaam story back into the Abraham story and imagine what might be happening between the lines while Abraham is spending those 3 days riding on his donkey. What if, as Abraham was riding, God did become a little bit upset at the way Abraham responded seemingly so readily to offer his child? After all, this was the Abraham who argues what's going on. And perhaps God stationed a messenger along the way, but only the donkey saw the messenger. And it got to the point where the third day happened. Abraham bound his son on the altar, all the while ignoring the messages from his donkey, till a voice had to call out directly to Abraham from the heavens saying, "Don't do it." And in fact, Aharon Vardy, who runs the magnificent website, the Open Siddur Project, has written such a midrash. Okay, going back to Bilam's story. ותראה האתון את מלאך אדוני ניצב בדרך, וחרבו שליפה בידו. ותט האתון מן הדרך, ותלך בשדה, ויך בלעם את האתון, והטוטה הדרך. The donkey saw the angel, the messenger of God, standing in the path and holding a drawn sword in his hand. So, of course, the donkey veers off from the road and she goes off into the field on the side, right, where the grapes are planted. Bilam hits his donkey in order to steer her back on the path. Not so easy. ויעמוד מלאך אדוני במשעול הקמים, גדר מזה וגדר מזה. Now, God's messenger stands in the path between the vineyards with a fence on one side and a fence on the other. Picture a narrow lane keeping two people's vineyards apart from one another with a fence. And the donkey, the angel's blocking that. ותראה האתון את מלאך אדוני, ותלחץ אל הקיר, ותלחץ את רגל בלעם אל הקיר, ויוסף בהכותה. The donkey again sees the messenger of God, so the only way to avoid him, she presses against the wall. And you, the reader, know what's coming because there is someone on her back. She presses Bilam's leg against the wall. Maybe we should say she squashes Bilam's leg against the wall. So what does he do? He hits her again. They were into a different zone now. He's not even trying to steer her. He's like, ouch. Vayosef, beautiful language. We have Vayosef lahakotah. Bilam hits the donkey again. Well, now we've got the angel escalating. Vayosef malach Adonai. Once again, continuing in this vein, malach Adonai avod. Vayamod b'makom pisa asher ein derech lintot yamin u'smol. Now the angel of God is continuing on, and he stands in a narrow place where there is absolutely no possibility, no way to turn right or left. There's just no way to get around this angel. I love that. The messages from God are becoming more and more and more insistent. This is just a beautiful parallel to the dream story where Bilam's dreams are all over the place. And now the messenger is like, there's only one way to interpret this. There's only one way to interpret this, getting narrower and narrower. ותראה האתון את מלאך אדוני, ותרבץ תחת בלעם, ויחר אף בלעם, ויך את האתון במקל. The donkey sees the angel. There's no place to go. So what does she do? She just lies down, which is a very clear communication to Bilam that they are not going anywhere. What does Bilam do? He gets really angry now, which is good. He's tuning in emotionally to the divine. He just doesn't know where to put his anger. Bilam gets angry and he hits the donkey with his stick. We got like 3 different hits. One is to guide her, one is an ouch for the ouch, and this one is he's just angry. He's losing it. And then, Vayiftach Adonai et pi ha'aton, vatomer leBil'am. מה עשיתי לך? כי הכיתני זה 3 רגלים. God opens the mouth of the donkey and she says to Bilam, what did I do to you that you hit me 3 times? And the word shalosh regalim makes it seem like it's something ragil, it's something habitual. So the donkey is saying, it's not my habit to treat you badly. Why are you now seeming to habitually respond to me by hitting me? ויאמר בלעם לאתון, כי התעללת בי, לו יש חרב בידי, כי אתה הרגתיך. Balaam says to the donkey, don't you love this? Balaam is not the slightest bit surprised that the donkey is speaking with him. And we don't know if this is because, Balaam lives in a kind of magical sense of reality, a kind of magical consciousness as a seer, or if it's because he's just so angry, he's in a completely altered consciousness. Balaam says to the donkey, I hit you because you made fun of me. You made a mockery of me. If I had a sword in my hand right now, I would kill you. The donkey holds steady. ותאמר האתון אל בלעם, הלא אנוכי אתונך, אשר רכבת עליי מאותך עד היום הזה. ההסכם הסכמתי לעשות לך כה? ויאמר לא. The donkey continues calmly, says to Balaam, aren't I your donkey? The one that you have ridden from way, way back until today. Has it ever been my habit to do this to you? Or if we want to bring in a cognate from modern Hebrew, sakana, danger. Have I ever put you in danger in all the years that we have been together? And Balaam says, no. This is amazing. All the dreams from God, and Balaam doesn't get it. And then the donkey reasons with him. And he says, oh. And after the donkey reasons with Balaam, and he calms down, at that moment, Balaam starts to see correctly with his spiritual perception. ויגל אדוני את עיני בלעם, וירא את מלאך אדוני ניצב בדרך, וחרבו שלופה בידו, ויקוד וישתחו לאפיו. At that moment, God opens or uncovers the eyes of Balaam, right? An important locution, because later in the story, when Balaam blesses the Israelites, he declares that his eye is now open and he is seeing truly. God opens Balaam's eyes and he sees the messenger, he sees the angel of God standing right in his way. Oh my God, the guy was there all along and never saw him. But there's a twist. The angel's got a drawn sword in his hand. Now keep in mind, Balaam is just seeing the angel for the first time right now. So as far as Balaam knows, the angel is directly responding to Balaam's awful and angry and irrational threat to kill the donkey. And so the angel puts it into words. ויאמר אליו מלאך אדוני, על מה הכית את אתונך זה 3 רגלים? הנה אנוכי יצאתי לשטן, כי יראת הדרך לנגדי. The angel says to Balaam, why did you hit your donkey these 3 times? It was me. I came out to oppose you because I don't like this errand that you're on. It's upsetting to me. ותראי האתון ותק לפניי זה 3 רגלים, אולי נטת מפניי, כי אתה גם אותך הרגתי ואותך החייתי. The donkey saw me and she veered away from me 3 times. Has it occurred to you that maybe she was veering away from me? You know, if I didn't know better, I'd kill you and let her live. Next verse, I won't translate. Bilam says to the messenger, I sinned, I missed the mark, I did the wrong thing. I really didn't know that you were standing here to greet me or to call to me along the way. And now, like, if you really don't want me to go on this errand, I'm getting a message, I'll go back. And the angel says, no, just go with the people, but say nothing other than what I tell you to say along the way. And of course, as the story unfolds, Bilam goes where he is hired. He stalls and stalls along the way, but ultimately, when he looks down at the Israelite camp, instead of cursing them, he blesses them. There are just 2 very small texts that I want to talk about in the last couple minutes. If Janice, thanks so much for sharing the text. Let's go back to the screen share. And yes, this one, the photo of the baby. A little beautiful snippet from Rashi, our canonical midrashic commentator on this. Rashi's commenting on Vaterei ha'atom, the hu lo ha'a. How did it happen that the donkey saw, but Bilam did not see? שנתן הקדוש ברוך הוא רשות לבהמה לראות יותר מן האדם, שמתוך שיש בו דעת, תתערף דעתו שיראה מזיקים. Bilam did not see because the Holy One of Blessing gave animals permission to see more than human beings. Since humans have rationality, their reason would be shattered if they saw spirits. Particularly in this little snippet, evil spirits, but good spirits as well. I love this Rashi, right? This Rashi observes that there are different modes of consciousness. There are different ways of being in the universe and perceiving the universe. The human way, and perhaps Rashi overstates the case when he talks about human rationality, but still, the human way is one way of conceptualizing and understanding what we see. And the donkey way, Rashi lumps all of the animals together with the donkey, but we'll be more specific. The donkey way is a more feeling way. The donkey sees the spirits, feels the emotional currents, empathizes with the person it's working with, and has a different way of perception. And guess what? Sometimes it's more effective than the human way of perceiving. I have a little more to say, but I'm just going to pause here, and I'm going to leave a question to ponder, but maybe I already answered the question. And that question is, given that we have a biblical type scene here, where a person is supposed to get on their donkey and be guided to the right way, Bilam gets on his donkey and wow, is it a struggle to be guided to the right way? What is there to learn as a spiritual or moral teaching from Bilam's story? So let's pause the share. And hang on. Now I see. Rachel, do you want to see if anybody on your screen is wanting to make a comment?
I'm looking. I'm going to put myself back in gallery so I can see everybody. So the invitation for us, just reinforcing Rabbi Laura's question, is what might this have to say to us if the donkey is guiding Bilam to the right path, but he is such, as she said, it's such a struggle for him to agree to go. What might that be saying to us? And there's space here to chime in if we'd like to. I know I had my answer that I was about to put in the chat, but any thoughts from any of us here, including the Vancouver theology people who are with us? I think you can unmute yourself if you want to say something.
If not, you can raise your hand. And
Yeah, or you can raise your hand.
We're learning a lot about how animals have perceptions that we do not have any access to, both in all senses. And so it's kind of interesting to have the Torah written in such a way that makes us aware of something that they quite understood, perhaps, on some particular level. And I certainly agree with the fact that it teaches us humility, as we need to have humility for all of life around us, even if we don't quite understand it.
Great. Thank you, Gail. And you also, for the people in the room that maybe, I don't know, I guess you can see the chat if you open it. Rob.
awesome. Thank you, Gail. It's a great way of affirming some of the ancient wisdom in our tradition.
Yeah. Amy, go ahead.
I think a really important element of the story is how he beats the donkey. And I feel like there's an important message of having humility and having patience.
I agree. And there's that message there that when you get angry, you don't see things clearly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's underscoring how important the patience is to even access that rationality. So thank you.
Go ahead, BJ. And then it looks like Luther, you were going to say something, but you're muted. So hold on just a second. So BJ, go ahead, and then Luther.
Speaking about the different ways of biblical exegesis and the remez and the allegory, I was struck by, again, how the story of Bilam and the donkey is sort of indicative of the struggle that he's going through in terms of, God asking or telling him one thing and Balak sort of insisting that he do something else. I think it's something that all of us go through in terms of morally or ethically on a very regular basis. Like we're torn between these two sides that are, pulling us, and the donkey is sort of physically acting this out in terms of this push and pull.
Yeah, thank you. I have a comment on that. Is it okay if I respond to each person, Rachel?
Yeah, it's fine. We have two more people ready to also share, I think. Carol and Luther, I don't know if you still want to say something. You're still muted, so I can see that you're saying something, but I can't.
I'll go to close with a response to what BJ said.
Okay. Oh, okay. So maybe Luther and then Carol, and then we'll turn it back to Rabbi Laura.
Well, it's Jean Angus who has been waiting patiently, possibly in Vancouver, to say something.
Ah, okay. Thank you. I didn't see that. I'm just relying on people using the hand raising function. So, Jean, I don't know where you are, but thank you, Luther, for noticing.
Yeah, I'm in Vancouver. A lot of times I get frustrated when I can't seem to find an answer that I think should be easy to find because I'm only using one of my knowledge resources, and it's a very narrow resource. So I'm learning to just stop, examine what am I feeling, what am I thinking, and just let the solution come to me, because there are other sources that are trying to teach me. And you can't get very far if you keep blocking all that out. So I have to let my spirit come in. And what is our beloved Adonai trying to really tell me or show me? I have to let that happen, but I have to be aware that I'm blocking it. And that's a hard thing to admit to self.
Mm. Hear, hear.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. So, Rabbi Laura, a couple more comments from people and then back to you, or how do you want to?
That's fine.
Okay, so Carol, and then it looks like Tony Snow, and then maybe back to Rabbi Laura.
I think I'm re-saying what some other people have said, but it's so difficult when we are so strongly convinced of a certain way of thinking. If we believe a big lie, for instance, we really, really, really believe it, and the evidence can be all around us, and we can ignore it because of our conviction. So I saw that a lot as a teacher of young children. I see that today in my political foes, and I just think poor Balaam was a creature of what he had been taught and what he exemplified. It was hard for him to get the truth.
So it starts announcing from a radically different point of view.
Yeah. Thank you, Carol. Tony?
Hello. I think it's really interesting coming from an indigenous perspective to hear these stories. They sound very much like our oral traditions and some of the tales and legends that are recounted from generation to generation. And so when I hear the talking donkey, it reminds us that in my father's book, he talks about how we talked to the animals, how we had a relationship with the animals, and they understood us and they talked back to us. They came to us in visions and dreams. So there's a close connection to nature and to elements of nature informing us about God's plan, about relationship to God, and how that teaches us. So in this example, what I'm hearing is a story of reconciliation. I'm hearing a story of the abused animal turning back and speaking and having an embodiment in that relationship to speak back to the owner and to talk about their relationship, to talk about what's going on and to question. And so when I hear that response of not knowing and of having to reconsider, and then the angel afterwards, this is it's kind of indicating to me that relationship that we talk about is that the animals follow the laws of Creator. The animals follow the rules of creation, and so they are living out that faithfulness. We talk about birds like the robin as the first bird that sings in the morning is the one that wakes up the world. It is their relationship with God. They're praying to God as they open the world, and they allow the other birds and other animals to wake up and start their day. So there's an understanding of the function of animal relationship in the larger context of creation. So that's what I'm hearing as I hear this story, and I think it's an important part of remembering that we have these relationships, and that in the society we have now that kind of looks at land, looks at animals as objects. There's these kind of stories humanize in a way that we can understand. but it also gives empathy to those animals that are affected by our action. So that's what I heard. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. Let's turn back to Rabbi Laura. Laura, unfortunately, some of our folks are going to start peeling away because they have commitments on the hour. So,
Yeah, thanks. I can be complete now. I do not need to add anything.
oh,
Except to say that there's also some other fabulous comments in the chat box.
yes, there are some wonderful things.
The very end is about the Cabo and the magical, the apparently magical and miraculous things created just between the seventh day of creation and the first Shabbat, the apparently magical things that are nonetheless created by God. The beautiful comment that we think donkeys can be stubborn, but actually maybe we're the stubborn ones. And more about what we can learn from animals.
Yeah. And at the end here, you'll see from Kevin looping back to the Akedah, to the binding of Isaac, which is, I certainly have never seen that connection before. And I'm very grateful for, wow, for all of this. What a gift to be able to look at these verses and see probably only the beginning of some of the richness that's here. I have to admit, with all due respect to the Book of Numbers, I feel like sometimes, at least in a congregational setting, it gets a little bit of short shrift because it's July and people are away and we're not really paying attention. And so, thank you so much for putting this in front of us in a way that at least I know I hadn't seen before, and I'm guessing others as well. And what a message for us about resistance and about being aware of resistance and how much we are likely to resist. And as I think it was Jean who was saying, to just discern about that and notice where our resistance is coming up and whether it's an appropriate response, whether it's a helpful response or not.
Well, thank you so much. It's been great to learn with you and from you. And thanks so much also to the kind people who have put thank yous and kind notes in the chat box.
Yes, great to see everyone. Vancouver theology students, thank you for joining us. Nice to connect with you, and I hope our paths will cross again. And Adat Shalom folks, great to see all of you as we do. And everyone have a good rest of the week. Thank you so much, Rabbi Laura. And everybody keep well.
Thanks. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.